This is the No BS Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Shanks. In this show, we look behind the curtain of financial services to find answers to the biggest questions no one is asking. Join me as I welcome industry influencers, outside business leaders, and inspirational game changers for real, no BS conversations that will challenge you to think big. I want to motivate you to find purpose and fulfillment in your career. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome to the No BS Podcast. Today, my guest is Robert Russo. He's the husband and father to two boys, and he's the founder and CEO of Independent Advisor Alliance, the largest LPL hybrid firm in the Mid-Atlantic, where they are committed to providing their advisors the highest level of compliance oversight, advisor advocacy, and personalized service while maintaining an advantageous financial model. In addition, Robert is a member of the board of directors for Communities and Schools of Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Our topic today will be, what is independence for an advisor? Robert, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So as we jump in here, I'd like to just ask the question, your wife of 15 years, Natalia, works for LPL. How did the two of you meet?
Well, not in the financial services industry, that's for sure. I had when I started my career, I was out in Newport Beach, California, and she was a student at UCLA, and I met her in a small beach bar in Huntington Beach, and obviously stayed out there in Orange County for quite some time, and we didn't move to Charlotte until we got engaged.
That's great. That's great. You know, I've seen folks who work together either directly or indirectly in the industry. And I'm always curious how that shakes out, because at the end of the day, when you talk about, hey, how was your day? You actually both understand the same language, right?
Yeah,
and I always wonder if that's a benefit or not.
No, it's fun, right? I mean, she has obviously some topics that maybe she won't speak towards, and me the same, but it is nice to have some context. And when she explains how her day went and some people that are involved, right? I, in many cases, know those people or understand the problem, because with her role there, she essentially communicates to the 20,000 advisors at LPL about something that happened that they need to be aware of. And so it is interesting to go home and to hear that whole process and how LPL internally got to that spot. And it's fun to talk about. So I think it actually is a very good thing for us. I can see how maybe some others that might not enjoy that, but she and I are both committed to the industry, and it's great to bounce ideas off of each other as well.
That's great. And congrats to LPL, by the way, for just recently announcing that they've passed 20,000 financial advisors. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, that's pretty big time.
It's pretty big time.
Yeah, that's pretty big time.
And so, and that's actually really a nice sort of exclamation point around independence in our topic for the day. So let's jump right in regarding the business that we're in. What brought you into the financial services?
It was a total accident. I was just walking around a mall looking for a job after I moved to California to go find myself. And at the time, American Express Financial Advisors found me. And, I was one of 50 or so folks that went through their training program. And so I appreciated the opportunity and passed my 7 with American Express Financial Advisors, now I guess known as Ameriprise. And then shortly thereafter moved and worked with A.G. Edwards out in Newport Beach, and then transitioned from the A.G. Edwards out there to the A.G. Edwards here in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow. And I'll tell you something, those two companies, American Express and A.G. Edwards, when you go back to the heritage of both of those firms, I mean, in the training around financial planning, the client engagement model, I mean, they were really two of the best. So, you couldn't have gotten lucky and come into this business with two better firms.
Yeah, I feel the same. I'm very appreciative of all the folks that helped me in the past and kind of laid some groundwork for me.
So you played football in college for the University of Tennessee.
Yeah, I would say played as a stretch. I was on the team. We joke around. I was like a 4th string kicker over there, but I was there during some exciting times. Peyton Manning's senior year was the last year that I was enrolled with the team at the same time. So got to see some excellent years. We call it the glory years. That's how you know you're getting a little bit older, but enjoyed it, learned a lot, because originally wanted to go and be a sports agent. And so that's kind of why I hung around the program, even though I really didn't have the opportunity to continue a football career beyond that, that four-string kicker.
Wow. Well, you still were rostered, right? So you still did what you needed to do to make that team. And I know that there's a limited number there. So, and it actually might make the next part of my question even more intriguing because, you talked about being fourth string. So how did that prepare you to compete in our industry?
Just challenging yourself, right? I mean, you grow up and you're in your town, you coach lacrosse and you're in your little bubble. And at some point in certain sports, you become the best in your little bubble. And then you realize there's a greater bubble out there and it pushes you more, right? And you go state and then all of a sudden you're, whether you're in the SEC or depending on your level and you realize the world is much bigger than your hometown. And so you have to keep getting better. You constantly have to evolve. And I think it just pushes you. And sometimes the people don't progress because they don't really kind of move out of their home area. And so that was really a big thing for me. And I probably would say that I grew more at Tennessee, not related to anything from a sports perspective, but growing up in Philadelphia and experiencing a totally different culture down in Knoxville. I grew a lot as a person there, which was probably a lot more instrumental to what I'm doing now than really anything from a sports perspective.
Got it. So you did your own soul searching.
I did, and I was part of a fraternity. I really experienced a lot of people, we joke around. It was a fantastic 6-year undergrad program that I went through there in Knoxville. And I just needed a little bit longer than some other folks. And I'm thankful that, I was there and that obviously that experience has really helped me out. So I love Knoxville, Tennessee. And I don't know when this is exactly going to be aired, but I will say that hopefully the Tennessee Volunteers baseball team hopefully will have done well in Omaha because I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Shout out to Texas. Hopefully they win the women's championship as well. So how did Independent Advisor Alliance come about? It's a company that you founded and that you're the CEO of and really the operator of. How did it all start?
So in 2006, I was with A.G. Edwards, and there was some writing on the wall in terms of what that company was going to be doing. They did some just unique things, right? I mean, they came out with a proprietary product. They'd never done that before. They were switching their technology. They were just something just seemed like they weren't doing what was typically a pattern of theirs. And ultimately, I ended up leaving A.G. Edwards to go to LPL Financial about 10 days before Wachovia purchased A.G. Edwards. And so when I came over to LPL, I was an institutional advisor doing mostly corporate retirement plans, defined benefit, defined contribution plans. And I had talked to the recruiter at the time, who's still a good friend of mine, Jeff Draper, who's now with Fidelity. And, I was trying to get all of these independent practitioners that do retail wealth management to give me a shot to be their kind of 401k arm of their practice. And, it was taking a little while to get off the ground. And I had asked, hey, is there any way that you think I could approach these advisors? And he did say, hey, I could use an OSJ, a principal in the area to help some folks go independent that don't have their 24. And so I did that. And for a period of about 3 or 4 years, I kind of ran two models. I acted as some advisors OSJ and then also maintained an institutional book of business. And then in 2014, we had recruited an advisor that had a past and a history within the corporate retirement plan space. And I sold him my business. And in 2014, opened up Independent Advisor Alliance, really based upon recognizing that I enjoyed working with advisors rather than sitting in a boardroom with folks that were checking boxes, right? I mean, you come in and you're talking to a leadership team at a small company, and you're sitting in there and you're talking about the retirement plan, and they need to check some boxes and do what they're supposed to be doing as stewards and fiduciaries of the plan. But it wasn't the love that they had for the plan, right? It was more of a necessary evil. In my world now and what I do, it's not a necessary evil. I think people really enjoy the partnership. And so I was really excited to do that in 2014. We opened up the RIA, which is known as Independent Advisor Alliance as well. And since then, really have just been making sure that we stick to our core values and are running it a good shop that provides advisors an opportunity to be business owners, and we try to help them execute on their vision.
How many financial advisor affiliates do you currently have?
So we have a little bit over 250 advisors, but we use a term partner firms, and we have 151 partner firms, and view partner firms as brands. So we work with 151 different brands, and from an advisor lingo perspective, I would say 151 households versus 250 accounts. And they're, primarily we started in Charlotte, and then we expanded to the Carolinas. And then we were on the East Coast, and really about 2 to 3 years ago, we made a very concerted effort to become a national firm. And we feel like our model is very easily done from a national perspective.
Well, I want to say kudos to you and congrats on the success thus far. That's a lot of relationships to manage at that level and that brand kind of affiliation. What do you believe is the largest misconception about independence in our industry?
Well, I don't know if it's a misconception, but I'll say that I don't know that is a word that means the same thing to everybody. There's so many different variations of independence. So yeah, I guess if I'm going to back into what maybe is misconstrued as independence, it's really understanding what is the essential part that you're looking for. It used to be, hey, I just don't want a conflict. I don't like proprietary products. And so that would be considered independence. Then it was, well, I don't want to be W-2'd. I want to be 1099 because I want to control my P&L. That used to be independence. And then it morphs, right? Now it's, hey, I want to own my business. I want to be able to take my clients wherever, whenever that I want. And I'm now looking for support. I'm not looking for management of anything within my practice. So I think the biggest difficulty using the word independence is it just means so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm really glad that we're having this conversation today to try to dispel that, right? Create some clarity around that. And I know when you and I were talking about having you come on and join, what we really wanted to get into and something that was in the market at the time. And I want to make sure that we sort of pointed out is, Hightower, where they were in the news for an advisor who left them, and they pursued legal action against him. Now, he wasn't technically independent. So what advice do you have for financial advisors who are considering the option of joining a larger RIA when it comes to the legal agreements?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you got to have an exit strategy. If you compare partnerships in this industry to even just marriages, right? I don't know what the stats are. Maybe 50% of folks get divorced, and it's a sad stat, but it's probably a pretty close and accurate stat. And, that involves very little money. Now you're having a partnership with somebody that you don't love, and it's all about money. And so typically there are going to be some issues along the way. And so making sure that those issues are very explicit in the contract, and there's not a doubt. And a small example. A lot of times folks say, well, I don't see in the contract that I can't take my clients. Well, but do you see in the contract that you can take your clients? And so shifting from it's not in there, so I'm okay, that creates a little bit of ambiguity. I would say make sure it specifically states, yes, you can take your clients, right? Be more on the affirmative side of that. And firms will put that in there. We have in our contract, if we're given 30 days notice, you can take your clients at any point for any reason without any kind of financial recourse. We put that in the contract. And so making sure that you read the contract, because things don't always go the way that you want them to go. And so I think the biggest thing is that exit agreement. What does it look like? And I think from a transparency perspective, it is the advisor's role, and I put the onus on the advisor to make sure they get what they want in that contract.
Yep. No, that's solid. And I think in a lot of instances, and I think it was certainly the case with this particular instance with Hightower, is to bring an advisor in. Typically, there's some proceeds that are given to that advisor as an incentive. And there may be some type of a retention component on the back end. And so, if you were to accept that and then to move there with your clients, you need to be really honest with yourself that it's not for free.
Yep.
Right. It's not just because you seem like a really good guy. we'll put something financial in front of you to incent you to move your clients over here so that we know that retention, but you can't then turn around and go and take it elsewhere.
That's correct. They're buying future profitability. And if that future profitability goes, they want their money back, and a lot of folks, ask, well, what do I do with the transition assistance? And sometimes the upfront money. And a lot of times it's a forgivable note, and maybe it's a 5 or a 7 year forgivable note. And, I would highly recommend, you take that, and every year that it's forgiven, that's now officially your money. But the other stuff on the back end, it's really not, right? I mean, there's a reason that the tax law allows you to forgive it in those future years, because technically it can be pulled in. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of things that can entice an advisor to move. But the folks that are paying those big checks, they have expectations.
Yeah, no, that's, I look at those scenarios and I think it's similar to you going to a bank and getting a loan to buy a home and then deciding to try to work a deal on the side to sell it to someone else, but to not repay the bank. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really get away with that. And so we see that happen oftentimes. And so, when we engage with breakaway advisors, we tell them, especially if they've got a substantial book of business and clients, the firm they're leaving is not going to be pleased by that departure. So we try to ensure that they're talking to legal counsel inside their state that understands any nuance around those laws, but also someone who is an expert in our vertical. And that can just allow for you to at least go into it with your eyes wide open.
Yeah.
So
you need the roadmap, like I said, on that exit strategy, regardless. And I think to your point, when we have advisors that we're working with and, they make the decision, hey, we're going to leverage you guys. We do have them, speak to counsel. We're not allowed to be on that meeting because we want to preserve the attorney-client privilege and things like that. But it's paid for and provided. And you learn a lot about the contracts by the folks that do that for a living. If I were to just give it a once over, I'm not going to find things that the attorneys find. So invest in yourself and in your practice and making sure that you understand kind of the small print. And, when advisors transition, it's funny. A lot of advisors are worried about, the other firm, the contra firm. What are they going to do? What are they not going to do? The reality is just follow the contract. Your clients will ultimately end up with you if that's what they want. And so, my biggest piece of advice is I wouldn't even test the contract. If you don't believe that you can fulfill the contract and eventually work with those clients, that you got to look yourself in the mirror there.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. When an advisor, specifically on the breakaway side, is determining whether they want to start their own RIA or join one, what advice do you have for them?
Well, I asked them if they really want to spend a couple hours a day reading SEC guidance, rules, and regs. And if they don't, quite honestly, it's a great opportunity for me and our firm at Independent Advisor Alliance. And some folks want to go ahead and say, well, we'll go ahead and, we'll bring in a chief compliance officer. And then I think, hey, that's great. If you're willing to invest in compliance, it's only going to get more difficult. And you bring in somebody that their job is truly to focus on the defensive part of the firm. I think it can be a very successful endeavor. But I don't think typically the person that's going to be doing compliance is that. I see advisors doing it almost as if it's kind of like a small part of what they do. And the SEC doesn't want that. They want to know that you're invested in compliance, and they like it when the sales and the compliance arms have a little bit of a wall. It's really hard to be in production, to be speaking to clients, and also telling from the compliance hat what you can and can't do. It's very difficult. So if you're willing to invest and find somebody that will run a dedicated compliance program, I would say it's an excellent situation. If not, and you think you're going to do it yourself, that's when you got to call somebody like myself or some of the firms that are in our space.
What do you think about when we think about broker protocol? What do you think about independent firms, your peer group, becoming a member solely for the purposes of recruiting?
Yeah, it's very common. It's very common. I mean, I get an email every day of all the new firms that sign up for that broker protocol. I don't, in the independent space, it's interesting because in our contracts, when somebody leaves, they can take whatever they want. And so I feel like sometimes in the independent space, the broker protocol doesn't mean as much because the contract supersedes that. But I see it every day. I mean, I'm getting the emails and people are constantly joining it. So I'm sure that they just want everyone to know that they're willing to play ball, even though their agreements probably go much further than the broker protocol.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a little bit ironic, right, to think that it originated out of the captive side of our industry. And when you think about it, really breakaway advisors in large part have been the feeder system to independents. And, you know, I always, when I talk to a breakaway advisor, I talk to them about sort of the risk involved in going independent and whether you want to, you know, build it and run it or whether you want to join it. Right. So what do you credit the influx of breakaway advisors to the independent side of our industry?
I mean, it's the controlling your destiny, right? Making decisions at the local level in your P&L. There's economics, right? You can't argue the economics. I mean, if you're an advisor and you're starting at a wirehouse, and there's a lot of great wirehouses out there, but you know, you go in and you're doing $100,000 in GDC or production, depending on your lingo, and you've got marble floors and you've got an admin and you've got support and you're making 40% payout. That makes sense, right? Because you're giving up $60,000 to get staff and floors and that kind of that logo on their wall and things like that. I think where it becomes a little long-term problematic is when you have that same staff member, you're going into that same office, you know, now you're doing $1 million in production or $5 million in production, and you start to calculate what that 60% is. And as somebody that probably is pretty familiar with finances, you're starting to question, is that the best way that you would spend the money for your practice? And the answer is just going to be no. And this is why I think this next wave of independence is happening very quickly. Is COVID really opened some eyes. A lot of advisors did just fine in communicating with clients without that local support that they felt like they needed at the time. And so it's speeding up. But I think from a breakaway perspective, the infrastructure now is so much greater than what it would have been even when I came to the independent side back in 2007. And what I mean by that is a lot of advisors remember the quote system, having access to data, and it was really unique. Now, look, everybody has access to information, right? We're all going to the same sites. We all have access to the same technology. And so that kind of discrepancy of the wirehouse having these great programs that not only advisors at independents didn't have, but clients didn't have access to it. Now it's everywhere. And so I think they're starting to do the math and they're recognizing that they don't need the brand as much. And in some cases, the brand is now starting to hurt the advisor. And all of those reasons combined, I mean, I think that's why you're seeing a consistent feed from the wirehouse side into the independent space.
When you think about independence and you think about, because there's two different paths you can take for independence, right? There's the RIA path. You could either choose to create an RIA and choose who you want to custody the assets with and all the different technology that comes with it. You could plug into an RIA or an RIA hybrid. You could launch your own independent company with an independent broker dealer. Historically independent broker dealers, so many of them now are really marking themselves as RIAs with a sidecar, a broker dealer. Yep. Or you could look to plug into an OSJ. When you think about those two buckets, RIA dominant or broker dealer dominant on the independent side, what's your advice to advisors when they're kind of contemplating either of those doors?
The RIA space is the one that's expanding, right? So the first thing is I would focus on where the business is and where it's going to go. And so the advisory side of the business is bigger. So really the RIA is becoming more and more important in the equation. The other thing is having the ability to have multi-custody options. So, you know, we talked a little bit, you asked about what does independence mean? And it's interesting because a lot of independent broker dealers have what we would consider a corporate model, meaning you're with their broker dealer and with their RIA. That is becoming almost the current day version of a captive in my eyes, right? And to be able to have access to multiple options because your clients are all going to be very different and the custodians might might in one case make sense for one and not the other. And so right now, if I were to have this board of all these different affiliation options, I am a big proponent of the hybrid option. We can work, by the way, just so that people know where my biases lie, we can work on the corporate. LPL is our broker dealer and we can be the OSJ. We can work in the hybrid capacity where LPL is our broker dealer. And then our advisory business can be currently at LPL, Schwab, TD, which is, I guess, one and the same, and Fidelity. Or we can do RIA only, of which then the assets can also be at any of those places. And the unique thing about hybrid, in my eyes, is that we talk about the word fiduciary, but it's really hard to be, in my eyes, a fiduciary when you don't have access to both sides, because then you're only able to do what you're able to do. So I like the hybrid space. Generically speaking, it doesn't mean it's right for all advisors, and there might be reasons why you would want to be RIA only or corporate. But I feel like the hybrid is the most advantageous, well-rounded, forward-looking platform that there is right now in the industry.
Yeah, no, I love the point you just hit on there, because I always make the argument that, the historical IBD side of our industry and the RIA side of our industry have never really seen eye to eye, and have sort of been of the opinion that our side's better. And I've never been a financial advisor, but I tend to personally agree with your comments. And if I were to be an advisor, I think that I would do so where there was some broker dealer component there, because you don't ever know when you're dealing with a current client or a prospective client, based upon their needs, where you need to go to solve it. And I think by having both of those options available, you do give yourself that entire coverage.
Yeah. The only time I really see the RIA business being, or the RIA only side making sense, is you're trying to do something that maybe is prohibited by FINRA, right? There's an outside business activity that FINRA wouldn't allow. Those are sometimes the areas. Now, I'm probably going to confuse a lot of people in this statement, but we do have brands that have somebody in the office that is hybrid, and then there is somebody in that office that is RIA only. And so we're seeing that model, that whole smorgasbord of models. We are now seeing brands be able to do different models within their own brand. And so we may have one group, Blackbridge Financial, as an example, is one of our subgroups, one of our partner firms. We have advisors that are RIA only and focus only on advisory-based clients. We have advisors that are hybrid, meaning they can do broker-dealer business and RIA business with independent advisor lines. And we actually have an advisor that is with Blackbridge Financial that is LPL corporate, using their BD and their RIA. So it used to be that the brand carried the disclosures, but it is now the individual. So you can have different models within the same team. I just think that's relatively new for most folks that are listening to this podcast.
Yeah, and that might be a great topic for the future, because, you go back even as recent as 5 years ago, and something like that wouldn't be allowed. So It's pretty phenomenal. Is there a leader in our industry that motivates you to become better?
No, nobody specific. I'm just a very competitive person. And so, I read and I see what people are doing, and I have a lot of respect for a lot of firms that are out there and some innovative things that they're doing. But there's not anybody specifically. The one thing that is neat about the industry in the last couple of years is people are definitely more willing to share than they were. I think we've all figured out that execution is what makes you successful, not necessarily the idea itself. And so I'm not trying to skirt that. I think there's a lot of people out there that are pretty amazing. I don't have any one or two folks that I would put above the rest. And, I look at numbers, I look at recruiting, I look at culture, and there's a lot of good firms out there. And we have a lot even within our ecosphere. At LPL, I'll name one actually, just because I have a lot of relationships with them, is Private Advisor Group. They're based out in New Jersey. That's a good firm. They've built a great business, and they've provided a path. My business started well after theirs, and without folks that kind of paved the way, we might not be where we are today. So but just excited that people are now willing to share, and they don't view us directly as competitors. They're willing to share because they recognize that execution matters.
Yeah. You're not going to get in trouble, are you, for not mentioning your wife as a leader in our industry that motivates
No.
you to become better?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if she's going to listen to this podcast or not. It'll be interesting to see. I'll send it to her for sure. She does have to read all the trade pubs because that stuff comes through, and LPL's communications team looks at it and sees what they need to respond at times. But she's definitely smarter than me. I can give her that. I mean, 6 years at a Tennessee is different than 4 years at a UCLA.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. So final question for you. And it's really something that brings you and I together. I always wanted to be a sports agent. It's actually something that I use in my tagline as sports agent to financial advisors, because I've always looked at this industry and thought traditional recruiting wants to represent the firm. They may say that they're representing the advisor, but they're representing who pays them. And I've always tried to draw a line there and said that if I do right by the advisor and treat them as my client as if they were an athlete, it comes back in spades in terms of them telling, other teammates about it. So it'd be interesting to think, is there a future chapter in our lives where perhaps we sort of align on that? Again, that could be a future conversation, but I just want to say thank you for joining me today. It was a real pleasure to get to know you in this way and for you to be so candid.
Yeah, no worries. I really enjoyed it. And anytime. And good luck with your upcoming tournaments. And I appreciate being on the show.
You got it.
The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of FA Match. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.